Hi, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whichever part of the world you're joining. I'm Dr. Rajendra Pratap Gupta, coordinator of the webinar series, and giving a brief about the Internet Governance Forum. Since Marcus Kamar is not there, I'll do the opening remarks as well as coordinate this webinar. IGF was founded by the United Nations in 2006 as a multi-stakeholder uh, group that discusses issues regarding the internet. And though it does not produce binding outcomes, but it has played an important role in ensuring that internet remains neutral, open, and secure and human-centric. And we have seen the importance of multi-stakeholder governance. We have examples that show how it has impacted the world. I mean, some of the examples I'll quote before we jump into our fourth webinar in the series. ICANN is a classic example, uh, a multi-stakeholder body that manages the domain names and keep an internet interoperable. It has played a key role in transition from US oversight to a global multi-stakeholder community in 2016, which is a landmark moment in internet governance. We have IGF, where we are hosting this webinar on behalf of the Dynamic Coalitions. We have SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which have a universal development roadmap for the world. We have WHO that has played a great role in pandemic time, the Global Partnership for AI, and the Global Digital Compact, which is in the making. As the Dynamic Coalition, we started doing the webinars to discuss bottom up on what we could do. We have done first one on global AI governance for humanity's benefit. We have done security in the digital age, the second webinar. Third, on the important topic of capacity building in digital age. And this is the fourth one and a very important one on the future of multi-stakeholder governance. We have seen that when it comes to multi-stakeholder governance, there are certain dimensions to that. One is it is about collaborative decision making. It's about diverse groups, a bottom-up approach, distributed leadership, transparency, and accountability. I mean, this being said, but we are living in a digital age, but in unprecedented times. In the geopolitical situations that we have to also look at the power asymmetry. We have to look at institutional frameworks, representational gaps, trust deficit, digital sovereignty conflict, which is nationalism versus global cooperation, and also how do we measure impact and outcomes. While these things happen, we have to see that these multi-stakeholder dialogues, uh, in this movement we are seeing in the age of internet, some of these stakeholders are adding up, some are being left behind. That's why I said unprecedented times. But then we have a global panel today of leaders who have been contributing significantly to the internet. We have with us today Mr. Mark Pavel, Senior Policy Advisor, IGF's Internet Standards Security and Safety Coalition. We have Camila Gonzalez, sorry for mispronouncing your name, the DC on Internet Universality Indicators. Mr. James Kulle Olondure, President of the Internet Society Nigeria chapter. Dr. Mohammed Shabir, Coordinator Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability. Dr. Perry Esfan Diari, President and Co-founder, Global Technopolitics Forum. Mr. Amrit Kumar, Co-chair of the Dynamic Teen Coalition. Dr. Scott Price, Director, Space Policy Institute and Professor of Practice of International Affairs at George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs, representing Dynamic Coalition on Interplanetary Internet. Mr. Torsten Kraus, Project Consultant, Children Rights in Digital World, Dynamic Coalition on Children Rights in the Digital Environment. And of course, Roman Chukov from the Secretariat, who has been the backbone for making these webinars what we are doing today. With this, I invite Mr. Mark Carwell. Mark, if you reflect, you have done work, I think, close to 4 decades in this space, being a part of the government and then on multilateral bodies. When you reflect back on the multi-stakeholder governance, how do you see that evolving? And what are your reflections?
Yes, thank you, Rajendra, and hello, everybody. Great to take part in this webinar as we, very timely one as we approach the WSIS Plus 20 review and the whole roster of fundamental principles that were established by the World Summit back in 2005, which I attended in part, mainly in the preparation phase, actually, for Tunis. But as you said, I was with the UK government at that time, and as a government policymaker, I participated in most of the IGFs that have taken place since then. I'm now retired from government work, but I'm still involved with a dynamic coalition, IS3C, as you mentioned, Internet Standards Security and Safety Coalition. I'm also involved in one of the major regional IGFs, EURIDIG, the European Digital Internet Governance Forum, Regional Internet Governance Forum for Europe, as a policy advisor on the UN process. So it's been a long road, a highly evolutionary road since Tunis, since the World Summit, since the formation of the IGF I'd seen at the original time as rather experimental thing to create a, as you said, non-decisional forum, but a global, inclusive, multi-stakeholder forum that would bring together government policymakers, academia, technical community, civil society, business users, academic experts, and so on. So, but it's still with us. It's been through 2 reviews by the UN after 5 years and after 10 years, and now we have the 20-year review. And a core fundamental is multi-stakeholder process, and how that has performed over the years. In preparation for the WSIS Plus 20 review, the CSD commissioned a report on how the outcomes of the WSIS in 2005 have been implemented, and how and that it's a long report. It's quite an extensive, comprehensive read. It's available on the CSDD website, the Commission on Science and Technology Development, and it underlines at regular intervals the critical importance of multi-stakeholder process, and so it has that. The report explains these results from a consultation that the CSDD did. So it's taking into account all the views of respondents to their consultation, including on multi-stakeholder process, and the report explains that the accounts of respondents was very positive about multi-stakeholder process. But nonetheless, there are gaps and problems that still need to be addressed. Some persistent problems. The engagement of stakeholder communities in the global south, in developing countries, least developed countries, has always been a challenge. The IGF has been held as an annual forum around the world, and it has endeavored to secure that valuable outreach to internet communities of stakeholders in developing countries, and I think that record is a valuable and successful one. But still, it's a challenge to ensure that none of those communities are left out, that the forum as the global central space for discussing existing challenges and what's coming up in terms of emerging technologies. It's vitally important that all those communities do participate. The IGF has evolved into a hybrid forum, so it's not necessary to attend in person and incur all the costs that result from traveling to a central to a forum in a convention center, wherever. There is the hybrid nature of the forum now, so you can participate actively and contribute remotely. But of course, it's not quite the same as being there on site and in person and interacting face to face, of securing those opportunities to go and talk to people in the corridors, people that you would never really ordinarily come across. They're there in the forum, so you can grab them, go for a coffee and talk to them. You know, what does quantum mean for the digital world? You know, to be able to tap into that kind of expertise face to face, it's incredibly important. So how do we ensure that all communities worldwide are engaged? And then there are, you know, issues about access for, or rather, taking account of the concerns of disadvantaged communities, disabled communities of people and so on, internet users. How are their voices being heard effectively in the IGF community is very important. Remains a challenge. Young people, how do we ensure that the next generation, the voices of the next generation are heard? There have been valuable efforts in that regard. At the global level, there is the Dynamic Coalition on the Youth Coalition on Internet Governance, YCIG. There's the Dynamic Teen Coalition, which is another youth forum within the IGF community, and one of the 30 plus dynamic coalitions. So there are platforms for young people. How do we ensure the IGF as a forum provides the opportunity for those voices to be heard in all discussions? I've always advocated, you know, that panelists for workshops held at IGF should actually reach out and ensure that there is a young person on their panel. I know panels are not now the greatly favored format for sessions, but it's important that young people do have the opportunity to express their views. So there are remaining challenges like that for a multi-stakeholder process to be genuinely multi-stakeholder. And I mean, if I just reflect on my experience as a policy advisor for Dynamic Coalition, it's not easy. We set it up, coordinator Voutanatras and we set it up in 2020 with the ambition to be fully multi-stakeholder. Our focus, our mission is about cybersecurity standards. So inevitably we would attract technical community experts in the area of security standards. That goes without saying. But of course, we wanted to ensure that we got policymakers from governments joining us. But that's not been easy to secure. I know from my experience, having been in government, it's not easy to carve out time and resource as a ministry person paid by taxpayers to spend time in a voluntary coalition of stakeholders in a dynamic coalition. It's not going to be easy to get that time and capacity to devote to a voluntary coalition of stakeholders and devote time and sustained commitment to such an initiative. It's not easy for a government person to achieve that. So we've endeavored to be multi-stakeholder as a dynamic coalition over the years since we set it up, and we're still working out how to enhance that multi-stakeholder requirement that we had set ourselves, and which of course all dynamic coalitions should aim for as part of our sort of commitment as an IGF related entity. All dynamic coalitions should aim to be multi-stakeholder. Civil society, we haven't really attracted much interest from civil society because we are perceived really as a very technical coalition. Although that may change because we're looking into issues like consumer awareness of security of devices and applications, and we're looking to set up a new working group on that area about consumer awareness and their rights in respect of purchasing devices which then turned out to be highly insecure. Um, I think I'll close there. I've touched on a lot of aspects here, agenda, but I hope that's been a helpful introduction for me, and I'd be happy to uh, talk more about specific aspects as we go through today's webinar and hear what other DC representatives say and what their experience is with the evolution of the multi-stakeholder process. Okay, back to you, Agenda.
Thank you, Mark. And as always, you are very straight and succinct. I think the points that you make are very clear that it's an evolutionary process, and there's nothing like an IGF where you come in person and experience that. You also made this very interesting point, which is, I think, given your vast experience in government and in multilateral bodies, that least developed countries have a disadvantage. There are disadvantaged communities, I would say, in this. But what I've seen in IGF over the last close to a decade, that we have been becoming more inclusive in terms of every aspect of what stakeholders are. I've personally seen how we had a youth coalition, now we have a teen coalition. Till we get to the infant coalition, we have everything in place. Having said that, I would come to Camila Gonzalez. Camila, you represent DC on Internet Universality Indicators, something that I have raised along with my colleagues, that still one third of the Internet, people are not connected to the Internet. How do you reflect back on the multi-stakeholder governance when it comes to universalization of Internet?
Yes, thank you very much, well, for having me, first of all. And then, well, first I wanted to apologize because my colleague Tatevi Gregorian was originally intended to participate today, but she had a last minute emergency. I couldn't be with us today, but then I'm going to, yeah, participate on behalf of DC IUI. And then, yes, just for your question, well, it also goes very in line with UNESCO's position, and also in terms of the uh, challenges and priorities that has identified into making, while broadband access has expanded dramatically, the use of digital tools remains elusive for many. And so, for instance, there's many UNESCO tools like the Internet Universality Indicators, the IUIs, that help countries move beyond basic access to ensure people have the skills, the literacy, and the tools for full digital participation. And so, the position is to address and use this gap by investing in relevant multilingual content and skills and inclusive digital public services. But then more related into IUI and the work that Dynamic Coalition also helps to drive forward. Well, first of all, the IUI stems off the concept of internet universality, which is grounded on four key principles or values, which are human rights, openness, access to all, and multi-stakeholder participation. So it's already one of the key components of internet universality and the internet universality indicators. And so in 2018, for instance, UNESCO published the first generation IUIs, which served as a more concrete tool to allow for internet an assessment of the state of internet development. And then later in 2024, just a few months ago, UNESCO launched the second generation IUIs, which since their creation, around 40 countries have implemented the internet universality indicators. And well, their role is to basically help stakeholders gain an comprehensive understanding of the state of the internet landscape at a national level, and then based off that, provide evidence-based policy recommendations that are addressed to each of the key stakeholder groups. So it's directed to each relevant actor. And so so the key components of how also the IUI kind of helps drive forward the multi-stakeholder participation. Well, in first place, as I said, is by the already incorporating multi-stakeholder participation within the ROMEX pillars. And so for that, it allows to assess the state of multi-stakeholder participation within a country. And so these assessments consider both the existence of institutional arrangements that already exist within a country, but then also the extent to which multi-stakeholder participation results in practice. And then this assessment also includes whether participation is genuinely balanced and includes the interest of all parts of the community and not just those that are explicitly or directly concerned with internet development. But then other of the key components of the IUI is the establishment of the MAB, the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Board, which is very much based on the IGF MAG model, but then it creates this structure at a national level. And basically what it does is that throughout the IUI process, the MAB provides guidance to research teams in terms of, for instance, facilitating access to data or information on internet access or whatever challenge there might be, and then information that could be hard to find depending on the countries, but then that this structure helps facilitate. But then also the idea is that this map is composed by the key stakeholder groups within a country. And so this can include all kinds of groups that can range from also more marginalized groups, including, for instance, youth or persons with disabilities and so on and so forth. How the map established very much depends on each country and how they do it. But then they also have a key role in providing validation to the findings, the recommendation, and agreeing on the priorities for implementation. And since the recommendations that come out of the IUI assessment are addressed to each of the stakeholder groups, the participation and the involvement of the MAB in this process also builds a sense of ownership that allows for a more thorough follow-up and to driving, strategy and vision into action and impact. And so I think this is also one of the key roles that IUI kind of helps build in and include the different voices into these internet governance discussions at a national level. And then, of course, we have this dynamic coalition on the IUI, which also includes different stakeholder groups, and it's more on information sharing and methodology information on IUI implementation, and very much based on collaboration, and it works at a more global or regional level even. So I think those would be the key points for
So Camilla, did I get the number right that 40 countries have IUI assessments? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Thank
at
you.
least 40 countries, yes, have implemented.
Okay. So very important points, Camilla, that you make, and this is something that tells us on what's going to come next is like you're saying that we have to move from basic tools to leveraging basic access to internet to leveraging digital tools. I think which also is indicative when you say only 40 countries have assessment tool out of almost 194 countries, and institutional arrangements that you talk about. So this brings me to James, who comes from the Dynamic Coalition on SIG and the Internet Society Nigeria chapters. So James, I want to ask you that are there some countries that inherently are at a disadvantage, and despite the era of multi-stakeholder governance, is it that the loudest and wealthiest actors have a disproportionate voice in multi-stakeholders? What are your views on that?
All right, thank you very much. I think there is no better time for us to have this conversation than now. And I think it's just the right time for us to talk about the future of multi-stakeholderism. And the question you asked me, it's a very relevant one, so to say. And as a matter of fact, it's one of those things that I actually wanted to talk about. And for me, first, I would like to even tweak the word that we have been using, the word multi-stakeholder. So I want to turn it into what I will call multi-equal stakeholders. And I will explain that in line of the question that you ask. So yes, we have multi-stakeholder and it has been working, so to say. And for me, I think the 20-year assessment we want to do is just a matter of, confirming what we have done so far and to advance, this multi-stakeholder governance that we've had in so many, communities. Take, for example, the IGF, which I think it's a beautiful model of multi-stakeholderism. And of course, I think it's a fantastic model of multi-stakeholderism, so to say. However, we need to start to look at how we are going to ensure that all these stakeholders are put on the same pedestal. On the same pedestal in the sense that if you identify, stakeholders, we should be able to say everybody has equal right when it comes to conversation, when it comes to decision taking, when it comes to hearing my voice or other people's voices. I think we should come to that stage. So for school on internet governance, one of the things we are focused on is inclusivity. And I'll give you an example. Example in the sense that if, let's say, we want to set a school now, maybe there's going to be a school, and in the process of getting people into the school, we try to look at all the stakeholders. We don't talk about very important stakeholders or relevant stakeholders. We talk about all the stakeholders. As a matter of fact, I will share experience from the last school that we had here in Nigeria. We made sure that we had, even the old ones in the school. I think we had somebody in the last school, somebody that is well above 60 years, right? Because I think there is this notion that people believe when you're talking about the school, that is school on internet governance, peradventure, this focus should be on the youth. So we have gone beyond that because we have discovered that the stakeholders we are talking about is everybody, and everybody has to be involved. So if you are having a stakeholder mapping out, you need to include the old ones, of course, the youth, I agree. Then you have to look at the genders too, the male, the female, and of course, like you rightly mentioned, maybe the rich and the poor. So everybody is expected to be within the stakeholders mapping that we're talking about. And that's one thing we are looking at. And like I said, the word equal has to be, included now, because we have the most multi-stakeholder, but everybody must have equal right. And I think that is going to be the future of this multi-stakeholder governance we are talking about. And apart from that, I listened to Mark and I listened to Camilla, excellent contributions, and I agree with them 100%. Right? But I think we need to now take this a little bit further. We need to start to look at, okay, these stakeholders we're talking about, we need to identify them properly, right? The government, the academia, the civil society, and like I said, we should be talking about even the aged group. I know why I'm saying that, because when you see the old ones, their perspectives are always different from the younger ones. So we need to bring everybody on board. So we should, map out a stakeholder known as, the aged, stakeholders. We should also be looking at, I know that we're always looking at the differently enabled people, but the question would now be, are they adequately represented? So we need to find a way to ensure that all the stakeholders are adequately represented so that the differently enabled people too are adequately represented, maybe at the IGF or ICANN, or just name all the governance structure that we are talking about. We need to be looking at that. And there is another stakeholder that I actually want to bring in now, which I think people will be like, wow. So we need to look at those people that are not really educated in the sense that probably maybe they cannot read and write. But of course, you will agree with me that they have opinions and they can actually voice out their opinions. We should find a way to bring them into this multi-stakeholder structure that we're talking about. And I think, when you come to the Global South, the truth of the matter is that, we have more less educated people here. So we should be looking at how we are going to bring them into this structure too. I think that is also important. That is talking about the mapping of the emerging stakeholders. And yeah, for us to, implement this adequately, I think we should be looking at this 5 helix model that speaks to, talking about the educational, environment or system, so to say, the economic structure, then the natural environment, the media-based and culture-based public, which of course, most of the time we refer to as the civil society, so to say, and the political system. But if you look at these 5 systems that I've mentioned, you will still need to take a look at each one of them and try to look at how you are going to cascade them into, the relevant groups. Take, for example, if you talk about the educational system now, in the educational system, we have the lecturers, right? And of course, we have the student. The way the lecturers reason is actually different from the way the students reason. So that means we need to find a balance in which all these people are going to be adequately represented. And to take it further, I believe that now we need to take it to the level in which even the multi-stakeholder governance is going to be aimed into the total structure of the society. That is talking about the polycentricity. Yes, we have the national, let's use IGF as a very good example because I think it's actually the focus of our conversation. We have the national IGF, right? Then we talk about the sub-regional IGF. Then we take it to the regional, talking about maybe Europe, Africa, and so on and so forth. And of course, the global, right? The global, we are looking at one in the next, I think in the next 10 days or less than that. I stand to be corrected on the number of days now. Yeah, in Norway. So yeah, that is the way it is now. But I believe that we should take it further. We should be looking at our geopolitical system. We should try to see how we can, aim the multi-stakeholderism into the political system in the sense that it should be cascaded to the smallest community in our area. People should be able to come forward and maybe make their voice heard so that at least their opinion will matter in whatever decision that is going to be taken. And I think this is the beauty of multi-stakeholderism because if multi-stakeholderism is not there, in fact, probably maybe people like me, I may not be able to, speak up, but because of this multi-stakeholderism, I'm able to speak up. And of course, we need to extend it to even the people in the smallest community, those people in the rural area. And I think that is the right way to go, looking at the future of multi-stakeholder governance. Then, like I started when I was talking about the School on Internet Governance, based on the question you asked me. So we look at inclusivity, right? And let me quickly talk about the process of School on Internet Governance. So after the whole exercise, we do come up with what is known as policy brief. And the question you may want to ask me is, what is this policy brief? So policy brief is a statement that, of course, all the people in the school as at that particular session or that cohort, they have contributed on in making sure that, okay, their own perspective is heard with respect to a particular policy. And you need to take a look at some of these policy briefs that have been produced. You will see how beautiful they are. And I begin to imagine if we now take this to the next level, I mean, in terms of ensuring that we implement all this. And I want to take this now from the school, output, even to the multi-stakeholder governance we're talking about. We need to now start to look at how we're going to implement all those conversations we're having, be it at the school, be it at the IGF, at the global level, be it at the regional level, and so on and so forth. We need, I know that we are implementing it, but what I'm saying now is that we should find a way to make it more impactful so that people will know that, oh, okay, this must be implemented. This should be implemented. Let me use that word. This should be implemented so that everybody will be bring up to speed in terms of what is happening, especially the political class. They would know that, oh, okay, if they're going to take a decision, this should be part of what should be considered in taking a particular decision on policies. And I think that should be the next line of action when it comes to the future of multi-stakeholder governance. I mean, it's just so beautiful that it brings everybody together, and that is the way to go. So let me leave it at that, and probably maybe later other issues will come up, then we can have more conversation about that. But I think this is a very interesting topic, and we can discuss it for the next 24 hours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. And I like the way you put it, that it has to be a multi-equal stakeholder, governance. But having said that, there are extrinsic factors that make you disadvantaged, and sometimes there are intrinsic factors, that make you disadvantaged. And we have the opportunity of having Dr. Mohammed Shabir with us, who is the coordinator for the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability. So, Dr. Shabir, you have been working in this area, and how do you see the role of multi-stakeholder governance and multi-stakeholder bodies in driving the agenda and giving you the space to address intrinsic factors that impact people being disadvantaged? I hope Dr. Shabir is here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Shabir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rajendra. And thank you very much to the earlier speakers for setting the stage for my speech. And the comments that I have for the next 5 minutes or so are based on the experience of the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability and my own experience of navigating this multi-stakeholder model for about more than 10 years or so. The Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability is one of the oldest in the DCs in the IGF system. And I think the setup of my talk right after the SIGS speaker, Schools on Internet Governance, uh, is a very opportune time and gives me a sort of stage where the schools on internet governance have been the key to train people in the multi-stakeholder model. And while we sit in this space and discuss what would be the future of, say, 20 years in the future, 2045, for the multi-stakeholder, and in this space, what would be the fate of people with disabilities? If you ask me, I would say it should not be the tokenistic one. Because from my perspective, if I see the claims, the statements that come out of different policies, strategies, they are very encouraging. But when I see the stats, they speak otherwise. The stats say people with disabilities consist of 15% of the world population. Now, 15% of world population would mean over a billion or 1.5 billion people who have or are living with disabilities. Now, as the technology and medical science and everything has advanced, so is the average lifespan of the people in many countries. Now, this is another indicator and a caution for us all to think about what would happen in 2045 in the digital spaces where we and our faculties will not be functioning as they are functioning today. Because I am sure many of the people who were in this space back in 2005 when we were discussing or when they were discussing the Internet Governance Forum. So many of them, they have left us for their eternally abode, but many of them, they still are in these spaces, but today they realize the need for accessibility and inclusion of persons with disabilities more than it was realized back in 2005 or in 2009 when DCAD was created. Now, what DCAD has done in all of these years is to advocate the to make the Internet Governance Forum and conferences accessible and equally approachable for people with disabilities. And if we see the definition of the UNCRPD given by the UN umbrella organization, which hosts the IGF itself, that disability is not in the person, it is in the society. Persons do have impairments like visual, hearing, physical, motor, psychological, cognitive, etc. But when those impairments interact with the barriers in the society, they called disabilities. And removing those barriers is the responsibility of the society, be they IGF, APR-IGF, Asia Pacific School on Internet Governance, or any other space. So my call for all the stakeholders in this space would be to not to speak about these people with disabilities, which are 15% of your population, but speak with them. Now, if you just see the stats of multi-stakeholder advisory group of the IGF, you would see number of people, and that is very less. Perhaps you can count the number on your fingers of two hands and still have some fingers left who had the lived experience of disability and then they have served on the MAG. So this speaks for how we have included the requirements of persons with disabilities in our decision-making processes. And that's what I call the tokenistic approach. Because now, I would agree that there have been a number of improvements in these spaces in terms of accessibility. Earlier, we don't used to have the sign language interpretation. Now, in some sessions, we do. Earlier, IGF was resistant to have human live captioning for people who are hearing impaired. Yes, now most of the sessions are being captioned. Earlier, the people were resistant to the idea of people with disabilities coming to IGF. Yes, now we do have fellowships thanks to Windsurf and Google LLC, so that we are at least able to bring some people, and that I would say even is a very lesser number comparing with the people who participate in the IGF spaces. But still, it is something that we are doing something and we can do in our limited capacities. But there is much more that needs to be done. And that can only be done if we shrug the tokenistic approach and adopt an approach which is all inclusive. And all of the speakers have spoken about this all inclusive approach. I do like the idea of equal multi stakeholder future, but that would be very difficult because so far, if we have not been able to include the largest minority on earth in our decision making processes, how would we ensure that the smallest minority on this earth, as the earlier speaker before me was speaking, that we need to ensure that their voices are heard in these spaces? So I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shabir. And I take your point that we should move beyond tokenization, but also a lot has changed. But of course, the speed and direction and the dimension also needs to be reflected upon. This brings me to my next expert panelist, Dr. Pari, who is president and co-founder Global Technopolitics Forum. Dr. Pari, we are in a area in a time when we are talking of a free world, interconnected world, but then we have the issue of geopolitics. We are fighting between the national sovereignties versus, the deglobalization or whatever we may call it. How do you reflect the multi-stakeholder governance in these times?
Thank you very much, Rajendra, and greetings to all of you. It's an honor to speak today on behalf of the dynamic correlation on the core internet values, which are global, interoperable, open, decentralized, end-to-end, robust and reliable, and freedom from harm. The coalition is committed to safeguarding these foundational principles that have enabled the internet to grow as a force for openness, innovation, and human empowerment across the globe. So you mentioned the geopolitical tension. Of course, we are not only impacted by geopolitical tension, which is actually increasing and unprecedented. We also have the innovation and also regulatory overtake. A combination actually impacts the core internet values with potential for fragmentation and also decentralization. So in fact, the core internet values are under pressure from many ways. So, and I mentioned centralization, which is a serious matter. As you all have mentioned, this is a defining moment for internet governance. And I think at this moment, it's important that while we are reassessing what hasn't worked, we should also look at, we have a duty to celebrate the achievements of the Visas Plus 20. So there has been a lot. I think the process has laid the groundwork for a governance approach rooted in inclusion and transparency and cooperation. It has formalized the multi-stakeholder approach, which has since become a pillar of internet governance. From IGF to ICANN, this approach created a space where governments, civil society, business, the technical community, and increasingly youth could come together as peers, not just participants, to shape our digital future. But the world around us is changing. As you mentioned, geopolitical tensions are arising, and still we are up for more surprises, more changes. In fact, the era of optimism is over in many ways. So I think in this context, and also it's important to note that the trust in institutions is fragile. So in this context, core internet values are more than historical artifacts. They're signposts for the road ahead. And these values are deeply intertwined with multi-stakeholderism, bottom-up governance, and the preservation of human agency. They were not just technical defaults. They were the philosophical and structural foundations of the internet's success. The internet was built organically through collaborative, non-sovereign, policy-centric systems. And this approach remains our best option for navigating what lies ahead. So yes, there is the governance structure must evolve, and they have to live up to their ideals. And a lot of the issues that needs to be discussed has been mentioned already by various speakers quite eloquently. So the question is not whether multi-stakeholderism still matters. It absolutely does. The question, I think, for us is how do we strengthen it without diluting it? So we don't need a foundational reset of the approach. What we need is a strategic upgrade. I believe that first we must move from token representation, as it was discussed, to shared responsibility. This means institutionalizing co-creation, not just consultation. Second, we need to support regional and local governance ecosystem that feed into global processes. Decision cannot be truly inclusive if they are disconnected from lived experiences. Third, we must bring multi-stakeholder governance into new domains, including AI, cybersecurity, and yes, interplanetary internet infrastructure. These are not just technical spaces, they're deeply political and ethical frontiers. This dynamic coalition believes that the core internet values can serve as a guiding compass in this expansion. They remind us that governance is not only about procedures, but about protecting openness, interoperability, and human dignity in digital forms. We must also remember that Visa Plus 20 is not just an anniversary, it's a strategic opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to these values and to translate them into action. That means building new bridges between stakeholders, sectors, and generations, embedding equity into governance design, reinforcing the legitimacy of institutions like the IGF, not through slogans, but through demonstrated accountability and responsiveness. And let me end on this note. The future of multi-stakeholder governance will not be secured by declaration alone. It will be defined by our willingness to evolve without erasing, to include without instrumentalizing, and to govern with values that reflect the best of what the internet has been and the best of what it could still become. And I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pari. And I'm still trying to assimilate the very important points you have made. Uh, Topical in a sense that if you see the geopolitics today and the opportunity internet and internet technologies present, we are definitely at the most important point of time in history where multi-stakeholder governance means a lot more than just governance. I mean, it could shape the future of humanity. I mean, when we talk of future, we can't miss out our very dynamic teen coalition co-chair, Amrit, who is here. Amrit, how do you see multi-stakeholder governance from the vantage point where you are today?
Thank you, Dr. Rajendra, distinguished colleagues, delegates, and friends. I come to you today from the front lines of a civil rights movement, one born inside the United Nations itself. Just days ago at the WSIS Plus 20 virtual stakeholder consultations, the Dynamic Teen Coalition stood before the system and said something that has never been said so clearly, so directly before. Teens are not the future. We are the present and we are here to lead. We laid out the truth that a system claiming to be people-centered, inclusive, and rights-based cannot keep defining youth as 18 to 35, cannot erase teens from governance, and cannot build our digital future while locking out those already shaping it. And then something extraordinary happened. Dr. Vince Cerf, chair of the IGF leadership panel, rose and responded. He didn't just hear us, he tracked and honored what we said. He acknowledged that we, the teens and young people, will inherit this world and all its mistakes. He pledged to carry our message and framework proposals forward to the IGF leadership panel and the MAG, a leadership panel that includes Maria Ressa, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. And then he continued that he was looking forward to finding more ways for us younger colleagues to actively participate. Because you're witnessing something historic right now. My presence here in this very webinar is the direct result of protest, of us standing up and saying a meaningful discussion on the future of multi-stakeholderism, on the role of children and teens in digital governance cannot happen without actual teens in the room. Let me say that again. This didn't happen by accident. Pyra Ruby Patel and Stacy Guildenstern, DTC co-chairs, built this movement through direct, participatory, teen-centered work. It started at the IGF 2022 in Africa because Pyra Ruby Patel, then 14, refused to sit in the back at the UN. Pyra didn't ask permission. She spent nearly 3 years building the framework we use today, a realistic, rights-based, lifelong multi-stakeholder structure that gives all humans a place at the table. And so, we have 0 to 12 years, child, a safety-focused track, 13 to 19 years, teens, human rights-focused, actual online participation recognized, 18 to early career, a transition to adulthood, with individual maturity respected and offering bridging supports, mid-career, developing targeted network interactions, and finally senior career, a time for giving back through mentorship. We didn't just develop this model, we included everyone when we built it. We developed it as a core requirement and beta tested it at the Dynamic Teen Coalition. We use it in our programs, our consultations, and our leadership structure. We built a thriving community on Discord with it. It works. We've proven that teens can lead, build, advise, and transform. We're not waiting for you to decide we're ready. We're already doing the work. And now we're demanding that the system catch up to reality. Ageism is not a technical glitch, it is a civil rights issue. You cannot claim inclusive multi-stakeholderism while systemically locking out teens from governance, as we've seen with regional mechanisms such as the EU's Youth Dig and the AU's youth programs, and even many civil society-led youth initiatives, where the bare minimum age for simply participating is set at 18. You can't claim to support rights-based governance while calling us minors to silence our agency. You can't build inclusive digital futures while upholding policies that exclude us from even registering for IGF roles. This is bigger than the IGF. This is about the United Nations itself, because inclusion that doesn't include teens isn't inclusion. Multi-stakeholderism that excludes one of the most connected, impacted, and capable demographics at the forefront of digital presence isn't multi-stakeholderism. And the civil society that tells us to wait our turn isn't civil. So today, we come with a demand, a model, and a dream. We demand a full formal review of age-related barriers across the entire IGF ecosystem, from NRIs to policy networks. We demand structural change, not token invitations. We demand recognition of teens as a distinct stakeholder group with funding, safeguards, and real roles. And we demand a model that is already working, the DTC's lifelong inclusive multi-stakeholder framework. We've done the work, we've earned our place, and now we're asking the UN to live up to its promise. Because this isn't just a call for inclusion, it's a dream of justice, a dream where teens are not erased but empowered, where digital rights begin at 13, not 18, where teen seats at the table is not an exception but the new rule. The dream starts here and starts now, and we thank you.
Thank you, Amrit. And I wholeheartedly support and endorse what you say. And I like everyone on this screen would do that. I would repeat what I see as a quote from Eric in the chat. And wise American, Native American sage once said, "We don't inherit the world from our parents, we borrow it from our children." Having said that, I would share my experience. I think everyone on the screen who has been involved with IGA would say that you're not here because you demanded. Anyone who wants to be here, there's a framework can be here, and that's why you are here. Anyone is welcome, and you will, I'm sure, be here. As our friend James said, multi-equal stakeholders. That's what I can testify working with IGF over the years. There is no need to be a rebel. Everyone is welcome, and that's why you have the same space like everyone. So now moving to Dr. Scott Pace. Dr. Scott, you are the Director of Space Policy Institute and Professor of the Practice of International Affairs at George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. You also represent the Dynamic Coalition and Interplanetary Internet. Now, we know the future is about age and others, but the future is also about space. That's the dimension of the word and its meaning in today's age. How do you, reflect upon this issue? Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Can people see my chat? See my slides okay?
Yeah, slides are not required, but we'd welcome them as long as they confine to 5 minutes or so. Thank you.
running a timer now, and so thank you for your indulgence. Anyway, so the first thing I want to say here is that a lot of things happening in interplanetary internet, in fact, are happening right now as we speak. This is not science fiction. This is something that's going on. As you well know, one of the big requirements for operating internet systems in space is precision time. And just recently, an Italian precision navigation timing receiver was demonstrated out at the moon, flew aboard a commercial lunar lander from the United States. And this was an important step toward a number of different international organizations that are currently involved in building a lunar PNT system. A nice congratulatory note there from the president of Italy. Now, on one hand, these international organizations are quite diverse, represent a variety of space agencies, a variety of different participants, but they certainly do not live up to, I think, the standards of multi-stakeholderism that have been described in this session. We're still struggling trying to get industry more involved. I mean, these are mostly governmental kinds of organizations, and certainly civil society is not always fully involved or represented in here. That's sort of the nature of it where we are at the moment, but I want to show you, I think, where we're going to be going. The interplanetary internet is going to be very familiar, I think, to terrestrial internet, but it's going to be different as well. You can think of being on the terrestrial internet as sort of going from like here to San Diego or any other local city. You get on the freeway and you go there. But the interplanetary internet for us is like going from here to, say, Jakarta, where you have a number of plane changes you have to make in between. So it isn't really a direct connection. You're basically packing your information together. You get to a node, you transfer to another node, you eventually get to your destination. So the kind of direct point-to-point communications that we've had with national space agencies, they have various cooperative agreements among them. It's not really a networked system that operates largely without permission. So an interplanetary internet will certainly, we hope, will be less friction in it, and it won't be quite the bureaucratic struggle that space communications is right now. The barriers to entry are higher, but we have opportunities to take lessons learned from the terrestrial internet to date, and been particularly grateful for the participation of Vint Cerf to keep the kind of guiding spirit of the internet also here in what we're trying to do. We think the interplanetary internet will evolve over time from a government system today, as the initial internet did, to one that has commercial backbones in it, and then eventually academic backbones, as well as multiple commercial systems. So hopefully a growth in diversity as more and more different types of people operate in space. We speak today of the democratization and globalization of space activity. Many more countries involved, many more entities at various different sizes, private, academic, NGOs, and so forth. Regarding governance, which is a whole larger topic, certainly more than 5 minutes, in the United Nations systems itself, the two really big important places for us is the International Telecom Union in Geneva, there in the center, which does frequency allocations, I'm sure you're familiar with, but also the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is the Vienna site there on the bottom right in your screen. And multi-stakeholder governance actually plays a role between these two institutions as well. The ITU is very much a multi-stakeholder environment. Now, only member states have votes, but people get to participate at all different levels: companies, NGOs, intragovernmental organizations. There are a variety of ways for people to participate in the ITU, but its scope is limited to really just spectrum and standards and a few topics. The Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space has a much larger mandate for pretty much everything in space. The problem is that it's really a multilateral organization. It's primarily about member states. And while the United States, I'm proud to say, has been good about including trade organizations and companies and occasionally private experts, it's still been a bit of a struggle to get multi-stakeholderism in there. And the current head of the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, Arti Valdamani, is very interested in doing more with multi-stakeholder, and she's been a great advocate, but she's up against, a larger bureaucracy. A couple quick observations. There really is no fundamental barrier to the creation of an interplanetary internet, at least from a governance standpoint, and we think we understand most of the technical issues involved. A lot of different forums to explore the concept, but they're primarily still multilateral, not multi-stakeholder. In some ways, we're fortunate we don't have a centralized authority, but like the internet itself, we have a series of technical standards, interfaces, and protocols to be implemented. The Consultative Committee on Space Data Standards is a technical group working on a variety of those sorts of standards, and they interface with the Internet Engineering Task Force, Internet Society, and so forth. Probably the biggest immediate task coming up is going to be an ITU one. The World Radio Conference in 2027 is going to be confirming frequencies for a variety of space activities, and probably the most important for us are those for lunar communications and navigation. So we're building actually infrastructure out in and around the moon. And the US has proposed a specific agenda item China is the other major player. We don't really see major conflicts there, but we know there's going to be some technical issues that are going to have to be worked on. And for those who love the terrestrial internet, do not worry. Terrestrial internet will still be out in space, but they'll be primarily for local purposes. If you're going to go long distances, we believe that delay-tolerant networking, bundled protocols are the standards you'll need to use, but your local Wi-Fi router inside your lunar facility should probably still work fine. We're working right now on standards for timing and spectrum and interface standards, and really starting to demonstrate this activity. And we also need to, of course, expand the range of civil society involved in it. If you want to learn more, here's a QR code for a report that we did on governance issues for internet architecture. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott, so much for enlightening us on this very important topic. It also, kind of is a signal to the multi-stakeholder community of the competencies we need to build to be a contributor to understanding the developments in this space. Having said that, now we have Torsten Kraus, project consultant at Children Rights in the Digital World and the Dynamic Coalition of Children Rights in Digital Environment. Mr. Torsten, how do you reflect on the multi-stakeholder governance and the cause that you represent?
Thank you very much, Ajendra. And it feels a little bit not okay. Maybe it feels a little bit false as an adult to speak after Amrit, who delivered very well on children's rights and claimed their rights to be heard in this community. But I will try to add something on this, and also to bring in another thought, especially to the IGF cosmos. Children are 1 out of 3 users of the digital environment. With curiosity, without reservation, often with a lot of naivety and also a bunch of interest and joy, they delve into the internet, new applications and services. They are often early adopters. And while doing so, they gain from opportunities for socializing, education, entertaining, and more. But children are also confronted with a lot of risks and not too rarely get harmed and put in danger. Therefore, it is necessary to mention that children are rights holders. Since 1989, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child guarantees minors the right to protection, to provision, and to participation. And minors means children that are born, 0 age, and then up in the most countries to 18. Article 12 of the Convention of the Right of the Child laid down that every child has the right to express her or his views freely in all matters affecting the child in all matters, and pointed out that the views of the child being given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. With regard to the digital environment, the United Nations declares to involve all children, listen to their needs, give due weight to their views when developing legislation, policies, programs, and services. State parties are encouraged to consult with children on relevant legislative, administrative, or other measures, and to ensure that their views are considered seriously. And what takes effect for state parties cannot be ignored by bodies or forums of the United Nations, as the Internet Governance Forum is. So I would like to encourage us all to think about how to realize a meaningful participation of minors within the IGF. Amrit told about this too. But before we start thinking about the participation of children, I would like to add another thought. The IGF reached a critical point. The UN is discussing about the future of internet governance, and it seems to be obvious that the IGF has to further improve and develop to shape internet governance in the future too. So we do not have to think about the participation of new, or let's better say, unconsidered stakeholders, but to rethink also the existing model of stakeholderism within the IGF. For example, just have a look at the dynamic coalition itself. In the past, and it's not that long ago, as it seems to be when we call it past, It was agreed that every dynamic coalition has an own slot in the schedule of the IGF and could realize whatever they want. With the emerging numbers of dynamic coalition, it was obvious that the system will no longer work. For the last IGF in Saudi Arabia, dynamic coalitions were invited to merge proposals and realize sessions together. That was an approach to reduce the number of slots needed for dynamic coalitions. This year, all session proposals of the dynamic coalitions went through the multi-advisory group and were decided by the member of the MAC. And I would like to ask if this is an appropriate approach, handling decisions on engaged members of the community working voluntarily and serving for the best interests of internet governance, each with a special focus. So I would like to conclude this small input with a pledge to rethink the multi-stakeholder model of the IGF, to enhance the role of dynamic coalitions and to realize participation of young people in the internet governance ecosystem. And to make it a bit of precise, we maybe think about to open up existing dynamic coalitions for minors. And I appreciate the work of the Teen Coalition, and we can see it as a from my perspective, can see it as a kind of a first step of inclusion of teens. But when we think further, we can see it also as a kind of exclusion, as we build an own space inside the IGF for teens and to separate them. But we can also think about to open up all dynamic coalitions for children and to realize participation of young people in the whole system. We may think about to have a child-friendly and easy accessible call for proposals. We need child-friendly language also in the whole system and in the representations. We can think about to establish local hubs with and for children. And we should invite children to take part at the IGF, to involve them, to ask them, and to give them the chance to reflect and present their views on pressing issues, and to let them participate while drafting the messages, of course. And we may also think about the role and representation of dynamic coalitions in the multi-advisory group. And to level this up and to add, we may think also about how to involve children in the work of the MAC. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Croston. And you made very important point, something that converges to my next question, which is to all the panelists. And before that, I would want Wout, who has been champion and a voice for various important issues. Wout, how do you reflect on the multi-stakeholder governance model from your work and your past experience working with IGF before I jump into questions to my expert panelists?
Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot, Rajendra. But I'm typing on Torsten's question on the number of sessions that dynamic coalitions get and that they're going down each year. And as I said yesterday in the dynamic coalition coordination meeting, that we've passed a line where we are not longer a main session. There's no translation, nothing available for dynamic coalitions anymore. We only have 4 sessions left. And we deliver tangible outcomes. We work on the cutting edge topics on internet governance. And in my 5 years of experience, and I'll go back even that, everything I heard about dynamic coalitions before 2020 was derogatory. Nobody took it serious. Nobody looked at it. What wasn't discussed in the MAG, if you talk to MAG members of those days, they didn't even know what dynamic coalitions were. And we've been working on this for the past 5 years as a dynamic coalition to get more recognition. And I think that we're getting that. We are more recognized. The work is more vocal. People hear us. We have these webinars. But at the same time, the number of our sessions go down. Our outcomes are not presented at high level. So nobody knows at a high level the work that we do. And I think that that is a very, very big challenge for dynamic coalitions in the near future if the IGF continues. How we make sure that our work is being recognized as an outcome of an IGF process. And that's something different than a UN process. That's been explained. We know that. But we need more recognition. People need to hear more what dynamic coalitions do and what their outcomes are. Because we're giving free policy advice to the world. We give on all sort of topics and important topics. As we've heard today, all the topics are tremendously important. But we also need to know that people know about it. And having said that, we've made tremendous progress, but I think we still have a big, big world to win on the multi-stakeholder process and also in the multi-stakeholder advisory group. And I would advocate that dynamic coalitions get a representative or maybe even 2 or 3 representatives there to get the message across, because it's obviously not working. Workshops are seen as the most important, and then I'll stop, but they are seen as the most important of the IGF. But they're totally free of any consequences. People discuss a topic and they go home. We discuss a topic a whole year long and come up with important outcomes, with recommendations, with conclusions, with action points. And if that does not get across, then as Marilyn Franklin said already 2 years ago, who would notice if we stopped the dynamic coalitions tomorrow? And I've never seen her in a dynamic coalition coordination group again after that comment, because she said, who would notice if we go? And I'm afraid there are too little people who would notice. And that would be a shame for the IGF and a shame for the world. So that is my experience. It is my hope, but also that we have to get this message across to a new MAG, because it will be a 100% new MAG next year that may have never heard of dynamic coalitions, and we're back in square zero. So there's hope. There's also some despair, but I think on the positive side is that we're showing the world what we are doing also in this webinar. And I've heard some great presentations today, for which I thank you all. So back to you, Rajendra.
Thank you, Wout. And the beauty of what I see at IGF is the freedom to choose to work on and freedom to express. And I guess over the year, we all have been at IGF. We have seen things moving in the positive direction. I mean, the very fact that IGF number above 30 is a fact that it is giving a platform. With more the people, I think they're still down to lesser forums, but I think they're still more impactful. And the last few minutes we have, I would go back to each of my panelists that if you were given a chance to design a global governance institution from the scratch in 2025, what are the 3 principles you would prioritize? And I would start with Mark Cavell.
Thank you. Wow, that's an interesting challenge for us all. I think we've touched on the foundational principles which we must preserve and protect and advance in the consultations on the WSIS Plus 20 coming up. And those are multi-stakeholder governance, strengthening that in recognition of the importance of including communities that are underrepresented, and that is referred to in the CSDD report. There is underrepresentation of communities worldwide in multi-stakeholder process. So multi-stakeholder, inclusive, maximize inclusive. Impact, touching on, really following on from Wout's intervention there, ensuring that what we do in this multi-stakeholder process has real impact. And that means I would tweak the IGF model in this new entity you're contemplating, building around the IGF model to make it a bit more proactive in reviewing progress, to take stock of what's happened since the previous 2 to 3 IGFs, especially on critical issues. how do we, this new entity should take stock and then review the progress and identify why things are not happening in accordance with what stakeholders have been saying should happen. So some kind of review activity. And then I think a third one is coordinating activity, especially on new technologies, emerging technologies, which we touched on. We recall, I think, those of us who were active, especially in government at the time of the Millennium Bug, the UN setting up a kind of coordinating committee to pull together actions that could be taken to mitigate what were perceived as potential risks from the millennium turning the clock on computers. The IGF could undertake, or this new entity, I don't know what you're going to call it, but anyway, an entity I would suggest built around enhancing and strengthening the IGF. Anyway, that entity should have some kind of capacity to coordinate activity to achieve specific aims. And this could apply to AI. I mean, at the moment there's a plethora of initiatives worldwide relating to human-centric AI and mitigating what might be perceived as risks. The IGF could undertake that kind of activity. And in our coalition, ISVC, we're looking at cybersecurity and post-quantum cryptography, Internet of Things. As Wout said, we're making specific proposals, which we're going to announce in Lillestrøm. Maybe there's a role for the IGF, or a new entity. I would hope it would be the IGF still, with a permanent mandate. Anyway, that could coordinate global activity so that everybody's going in the right direction. And then there's mutual benefits of cooperation. Okay, that's my off the top of my head response to your challenge, Rajendra. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Camila Gonzalez, your view. If people could limit to a minute or less, would be great.
Yes, yes. No, I was just gonna say, kind of sticking to the work at UI and what we assign with the Romex values. So, attached to human rights, international human rights law and standards, open, accessible to all, with multi-stakeholder participation, and that is also concerned for cross-cutting issues such as gender, sustainability, trust, security, but also children and teens involvement and persons with disabilities. So I would keep it to that.
James?
All right, thank you very much. So certainly put, I will just propose multi-equal stakeholderism, like I've advocated for, which I believe is going to help in bringing everybody on the same level playing field. And I think that is the way to go. And even from what we've had so far, I've seen that there are convergence. I mean, we've converged on this particular point, although we are coming from different perspectives. So that's going to be number one principle for me. And the second one is, of course, the proper map out of the stakeholders. The stakeholders, yeah, I can see that we are having new stakeholders group now talking about the things. So recall that I actually mentioned that we need to do proper map out of stakeholders. Why? Because there are emerging stakeholders. And one of those such groups is the teens group, which I believe probably their voices should be heard too. So I think that is very important. And of course, the aged one, like I earlier mentioned. So I think we need to do proper stakeholders mapping. And of course, the last but not the least, I want to see that at the end of all the conversations, we need to get this communicate all the recommendations implemented. So I would look for a strategy that is going to strengthen the output implementation. I think that is very important because it should be one of those things we should be looking at going forward from 20 plus now. For me, multi-stakeholderism is a done deal, but moving forward, what do we need to add to it? So we need to strengthen the implementation of the output document. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Mohammed Shabir. Mohammed Shabir, are you online?
Yes. Okay. So my first principle would be to implement the universal design. And universal design is something that is beneficial for everyone, though it is supposed and misunderstood to be beneficial for only people with disabilities. But as we have experienced that human real-time transcription benefits not just people who are hard of hearing, but more than them, this has been used by a number of researchers and other entities for various purposes. So this can be used for everyone. Second would be to emphasize that disability is not just for these 15% or for people who we just hear but not experience, because we do not face that. It could catch anyone and everyone, regardless of the geography they live in, regardless of the age they are at, and regardless of the color or caste, creed, or religion they follow. Because this is something that is universal and human. And the last thing that I would do is to have the say of people with disabilities in the decision-making processes. We would include the lived experience of people with disabilities with proper training, financial support, and with proper decision-making powers, providing them the seat at the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shabir. Dr. Pari.
Thank you very much. I think that the core internet values actually provide us with the signposts, because what it is, it offers global, inclusive, open system, which is encoded on the internet. So if we take lessons from that, it's very much intertwined with multi-stakeholder model, which is bottom-up governance and preservation of human agency. And I think these are the key points that if we take lesson from the internet, the core internet values, and bring it into the multi-stakeholder model, which already it's intertwined. It's a matter of strengthening and ensuring that these are working properly. I think that's what I would emphasize. The core internet values in terms of philosophical, ethical aspect of it within the multi-stakeholder model. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrit.
If we were to bring forward the three core values today, I think that would be the focus on rights-based, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder approach. And that's the approach that DTC has always considered and always advocated for. And so that's the model we always bring forward. I've even posted a link to the framework proposal that we've talked about, where it focuses on rights-based, lifelong multi-stakeholderism, and that's the foot we would like to step forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrit. Dr. Scott.
Hi. I think what I would say is come from a little bit of a different direction. I hear what's being said about multi-stakeholder in the space community and the ITU world that I'm more familiar with. We're taking internet values are certainly important and are taken, and we're trying to actually push them into the space area where it's not terribly common. We look for principles of compatibility between systems, that is, avoiding harmful interference. We look to interoperability if we can achieve it, not always possible for political reasons, not technical. So compatibility and interoperability to produce a result that at the ITU we call allocation of resources, that it's rational, efficient, and equitable. Now, you don't always get all three at once. There's a tension in there, but seeking to be rational, efficient, and equitable as we try to practice principles of non-interference and avoiding harmful interference in space, and then as a goal to be as interoperable as we can be in working with others. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Mr. Torsten?
Thanks, Rajendra. Yeah, there was a lot of was said. I would add maybe that we will strive to real diversity of the world community, and it just not ended with the regions or with the gender or which kind of which group we represent, but it's the age, it's the capabilities, it's also social backgrounds, for example. And that leads me to another point which Mohamed Shabir addressed, and also James, when he spoke about identifying the challenges of participation. And often I see that the lack of funding, financial support is a real hurdle, a real issue. And so I think we have to enrich the support to bring all people at the table. It could not be stick that I am able to pay the costs of the flight or for the hotel to take part in a conference. If we want to have all at the table, then we have to find solutions that we can bring them also to the conferences. And maybe I leave it at this two aspects because we are running out of time. Thanks.
Thank you, Torsten. Thank you for a very engaging and enlightening discussion on the multi-stakeholder governance. And I pass it to Roman Chukov, who's from the Secretariat, the backbone of getting all these webinars, all these great panelists on board to discuss important issues. Roman, over to you.